One of the things that I want to normalize is that starting at about age 7, we start to associate asking for help with it impacting our reputation, right? So starting when we're really young, we go, oh, if I say I don't know something or I can't do something by myself, people will think I'm weak. People will think I'm dumb, right? It will undermine my credibility. So I want to give everybody credit for the fact that if you are having trouble asking for help because you conflate asking for help with people thinking that you are weak or not credible or not smart, you've had this belief for decades and decades, right? I'm 50. So if I've been believing that since I'm 7, that's 43 years of wiring of neural pathways in my brain associating those two things. So the first thing I want people to know is it is very normal for you to have trouble asking for help and accepting help. And so one of the things that we recommend is, in addition to recognizing that, we've got this wiring in our brains, is to recognize that a big part of it is also our mindset, right? The beliefs that we have about asking for help and accepting help, which could be anything from, I want to preserve my reputation, to other people are busy, I don't want to bother them, to nobody will do it the way I will do it, so I should just do it myself. Do you recognize any of those mindsets?
Yep.
Yeah. Right? So those are really common. That being said, when you start to think about, one of the exercises that we ask people to do is to think about 5 people who you could call right now to help you, and they would say yes before they even ask, what do you need help with? Do you have 5 people that would help you no matter what it was?
Yep.
Yeah. And so when you think about those 5 people who would help you even before asking, what do you need help with? And you think about what they would think or say if they found out you needed help and you didn't ask them, they would be thinking, why didn't you ask me? I am here for you. You've helped me so many times. This is my opportunity to give it back to you. You shouldn't have to do this alone. Why suffer and struggle when you don't have to? So we ask people to adopt the mindset of their helpers. And when you adopt that mindset, you realize that people are wanting and waiting to help you. The people that you would ask for help hopefully will not judge you negatively for asking, but in fact will consider it flattering. Whenever anybody asks me for help, I am flattered that they ask me. That doesn't mean that I always can or should say yes, but I've never been insulted that somebody thought I could be helpful to them. And so it takes a little bit of trying on some new mindsets to help rechannel those neural pathways to get brave. It's really brave to ask for help. It's really going against our culture of what we've come to believe makes somebody successful. And it is entirely necessary for us to get better at anything.
There are 3 things that can help a person, and that's getting them involved in volunteering, mentoring, and philanthropy. So those don't have to be with people that are just around you. Those can be with complete strangers. So by getting a person involved in any of those 3 things, and volunteering and mentoring are free. So those are free things that people can do. So they've had things like grandmas who go into daycare settings and they hold babies. That can be a big change. Now, somebody might say, well, that's not a big deal. What could that be? But you're helping someone to make their life better. That is a big deal. So it can be something as the volunteering aspect of it can be whatever it might want to be. But our first instinct should be to find out what it is that a person can feel productive in. And it may be a surprising thing that we didn't expect. We always put a higher level on what we think that should be, in terms of that there should be some kind of effort or something that should have come from it. But it's usually our things that are most effortless that are the most powerful for us. So those are things we can do. We can engage if there's an older adult who is not doing much, but it looks like, boy, they're having a pampered life, but they're so unhappy. Well, get them out, get them to volunteer, whether it's holding babies in a preschool while they rock them in a chair, or it's helping to impart, well, these are the traditions. I'm going to share my traditions with you. I'm going to share with the things that are valuable. Religion, that's another big thing that people like to pass on. Mentoring. So some of the keys that people forget about are that we have our religion and faith and culture passed down from so many generations. How did that happen? Lots of times it's our grandmas.
So, trained from grandmas.
Yeah. Well, that should be super valued, and we need to remember that. And that's oftentimes what will bring a person out of feeling a sense of despair or that they're not getting anywhere, is sort of igniting that.
Wow.
How have I been helping myself to extend my ability to think?
Expand.
And let me try and understand the question.
Yes. That is the right
I mean,
question.
because I think all the time. That's all. So that's I'm an overthinker, I guess. I'm a deep thinker. I'm a deep thinker, and that is something that I've learned about myself. And so when I work with somebody, I start observing their body language, their facial language. I can look at somebody and see a perfect example, a simple example actually. There was somebody that I was talking to in one of those meetings I mentioned about charity, and I noticed that we were talking about a situation. His ears started to turn bright red, and then it spread around his face. And I said, it's okay. I believe you. You don't have to tell me if it's painful, but I'm listening if you want me to. The minute we open our eyes, you can start to see how people process shame or joy or sadness or anger when we give our whole focus to somebody else. We can learn how to interact better with them because we come to learn those things that they are comfortable with. And by the same token, have you ever spoken to somebody about a topic, and all of a sudden it was almost like a light came into their face, and you saw this big smile, and they're like, oh my God, you knew it was sincere. And just by paying attention to their eyes, to their face, to their hands, to their tone of voice, to the words that they use, you learn so much by giving your whole focus to somebody else. And I think in leadership, if you don't make that time and give it to each of the people you work with, you will never know what is important to them. You will never know what their strengths are. You will never know if there are things that they would like to do that they haven't gotten the chance to do. I spoke to somebody today. She is creating a new project. She went to the person she was working with and she said, you know what? I'd really like to be able to set up this spreadsheet on the data and the demographics, and I know it's not what I normally do, but I'd enjoy. Now you have an employee who says, this is what I like to do, this is what I could do, and can you let me do it? How many people have somebody come to them at work and say, could I please do this? Could I please learn this? Could I please put in extra time for free so I can learn how to do that? Everybody's looking for that, right? We all want that. And when you sit as a manager or as a leader and you give each person their own individual time, because they could be embarrassed in front of other people, there could be a conflict, they don't want somebody to make fun of what's their dream, making that time, even if it's once a week or every other week, and giving that block of time to each of your employees is an absolute gift. And when you have that conversation, you will discover so much more about the people that work with you, that you will discover the talent that you never even knew existed.
Exactly.
Amongst the people.
Absolutely, absolutely. So pay attention, listen, and give them the focus of the time, watching their language.
Absolutely. There are people who like to just focus on their spreadsheets. This is more important. We understand business is business and you've got your bottom line. So here's the bottom line. Your people want to belong. They want to matter. They want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want somebody to say, what's your opinion? Or, what was your experience? Have you ever done this before? Well, when you were in this situation, how did you handle it? And how did that work out? Would you recommend doing that again? Or do you think because of your experience, there'd be a better way to do that? That's tremendous information. And you only get it by literally making time.
Yep.
And giving another person focus and listening to the answers.
Absolutely.
Well, I will say that I'm a lifelong learner, and I really mean that, because I read everything I can get my hands on that relates to or is interest or can help me be more effective at what I do. But I also read things that are outside of my domain. So, for example, many of the people that I know who are industrial psychologists, they read a lot about things in industrial psychology over and over and over. But they don't go and read the stuff that is coming out of the engineering school, or they don't read the stuff that the technology people are saying. I try to interact with people who are outside of my narrow focus, because I want different ideas, new ideas. And I think, so there's the reading, I read, but I also interact with people who are thinking different things. And so they will say something and it will make me go, I wonder what that I wonder how. So it is really important to broaden your perspective. And right now, more than ever with technology, we can do that, because there's so many free courses, there are things you can read. It doesn't require a lot of money. But thinking, the thing about this is, in our culture in the United States, there's a lot of focus on action. And so people always say, okay, well, what are you going to do now? What are you going to do now? And I resist that idea, because sometimes you need space to think about something and just let it be processed. Not because you're looking to do something with it, but because you have a sense that these ideas will kind of grow and connect to one another unconsciously. And then one day you have this thing that comes out of your brain and you go, aha, I'm going to do that. But you didn't force yourself. You weren't saying, I'm trying to find an action. You were letting your brain and your body interact with the world and with the information long enough that other new ideas could emerge. Your unique way of looking at the world will influence what you do. And I think in our culture and in our time in the world where everything is so fast, we've got to slow down a little bit in order for that to happen.
Beautiful, beautiful.
I have different ways. So I always have a coach myself and a supervisor. And part of what I want from them is to challenge and stretch how I think and my honesty with myself. So it's creating the containers or those spaces which are really putting the focus on me. And frankly, I can't believe the arrogance of many coaches who go out there selling coaching who don't have a supervisor or a coach. Come on, guys, walk the talk. Really live this. The second thing is that I like walking my dog. And when I walk my dog and I'm out in nature, so much comes up for me. I process so many things, the situations at work, clients, big picture ideas, and I have a little notebook with me, and I just take a few notes. When I come back, I often gather up some more notes. If I'm not walking the dog, if my husband's walking the dog, then I have a little process of 20 minutes of journaling. But the journaling is really about allowing myself just to write without editing. I'm not writing it for anyone else to read. I'm just hearing myself through the writing. So it's a reflexive process. And then I do various forms of study to challenge my thinking. So the organisation I run, called the Team Coaching Studio, we train people in team coaching. We have a community of over 1,000 coaches globally, and we have so many amazing learning experiences. So we have webinars. This week we had a fascinating, incredible man called Nick Askew. He would be wonderful for your interviews.
Yeah, please introduce him to us.
Yeah, he makes films, and he was talking with us about the interview, and he interviews people, but in a much more being present to each other kind of way, and that was very powerful. We do supervision. We have a team coaching cafe where we get around, just in a room and think together. It's all virtual. And then we have something called the arena. So, this is taken from Brené Brown's idea about the courage to get into the arena. Team coaching takes a huge amount of courage. So the arena is a relatively safe place where, I say relatively safe because anyone practicing with peers tends to have some nerves, to feel nervous. But a safe place, nonetheless, where coaches can come and practice the art. A bit like going to life drawing classes, but it's the equivalent with team coaching. So we simulate a team, we simulate a team situation, and coaches get in and practice together, and then we reflect on that practice together. So we have various ways of continuing to think. And then having wonderful conversations like this really helps to stimulate learning and thinking and to look at something from a different angle.
Well, self-love and self-esteem go together because they're both really about valuing yourself and knowing that you're worthy. If you don't love yourself, you don't see that yourself as worthy of having a fulfilling life. People that struggle with self-esteem really have a hard time seeing that they are worth anything and that they undervalue themselves, and that can affect your job life. It can affect your friendships. It can affect your relationships. It really plays a huge role in that, and so does self-love. And they do sort of intersect in a way because they're both based on how you really view yourself in this world. I really believe that what I've seen sort of in the mental health area of people's lives has been so greatly affected. It's almost, I would say it's a pandemic within a pandemic. And I think, especially now with people working more from home, and there needs to be that real communication is really key. And I think that self-esteem and self-love really do play a huge role in our lives. And having more openness, more candor about it, being able to discuss mental health overall. When you think about, if you have really low self-esteem, it can lead to things like depression, anxiety. So of course, those things then impact every other area of your life. It affects your job performance. It affects your relationships. So I think there needs to be a lot more candor around that topic. And to stop, when people hear depression and anxiety, I still think to some degree that there's a stigma around that. And there shouldn't be. There needs to be, I think, a greater awareness and a greater understanding of those issues and where they stem from. And most of the time, people that struggle with anxiety and depression, it's either linked to a specific event that they've gone through, or it can be linked to like some sort of past trauma. And so there needs to be more understanding of where that stems from. And I would say that most of the clients that I speak with, anyone dealing with depression and anxiety, it's because of their low self-esteem. It's directly linked to that.
I always look at the pandemic. Yes, it had so many minuses. It had so many experiences that were really hard to go through, but it also came with its gifts. Like nothing is 100% negative and nothing is 100% positive. There is always a positive in all negative. It is about how we look at it, what we choose to focus on. And when I choose on the positive side of the pandemic, I see that I had the opportunity to connect with thousands and thousands of people. I'm not exaggerating. Like, it is amazing. It has been amazing. So every adversity has also its gifts in it. In general, people are like hamster wheels, and life is like that, and that becomes our routine and our normal. And with the pandemic, that hamster wheel was taken out from the cage. So the hamster was like, okay, what's going on now? What am I going to do now? And then it created the opportunity for everyone to turn around and look within, look themselves. What is life for me? What is my life purpose? Where am I going? What's next in life? What do I want? So it has been a huge opportunity to open our eyes. That life is more than that hamster wheel.
I don't know if that's the case for other divisions too, but marketing roles generally are quite exhausting because your life is, especially in global firms, in global brands. I mean, there is a product launch. You work really hard to make sure that the product launch goes well, and the product is launched, and then already that product is launching, then you are getting ready for the other product launch. So it's like a whole cycle of getting ready, planning, executing, and preparing a pitch to the global team, executing, and it's like you can really get exhausted and wasted. But the thing is that, going back to my childhood a bit, at the age of 20, I lost my dad. And I lost my dad like within a year because of cancer. And it was like one day he was one day he was there, the other day he was not there. So I started my career and my early childhood with a big loss in my heart. And that struck me with the reality that, okay, life is short. I mean, like, it can end anytime. And then over the last 20 years after I lost my dad, it's been like 22 years now, I've got reminded of this reality that it's life at the end of the day, because I have so many, people in our family, in my close family, they have cancer and then they are struggling with it and so on. So I have like, constant reminders in my life that life is short and you have to live it to the full. This is not to say that I'm living a mindful life every day, 7 days a week and so on, but it's like at the end of the day, this gave me an opportunity to see. I see it as an opportunity, actually. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm trying to justify my position here, but I'm trying to make the moment at the best of the life that I'm living. So every day, if something is exhausting me and I'm going back and I say, okay, what can I change here? What can I do here that will make my life better? And I'm not a believer of work-life balance, because we spend like 8 hours with our work, and I personally spent another 4 or 5 hours, at the shower, cooking and so on, thinking about work. So I always had the mindset of, okay, whatever I do for work, it needs to matter to me. I mean, I need to enjoy it, or I need to make it enjoyable for me. I mean, like, if I'm not happy with the profile that I'm doing, I need to enjoy it. That's why with roles, with global roles that you are given, let's say a brand director role or a brand manager role, the company gives you a chance to do some stuff, right? I mean, they gave you authority, they gave you responsibility, they gave you a budget. And the budget that we get is a very good budget, actually, compared to the smaller firms. So I always, when working with Nike, I always had this in mind. Okay, I have a budget, I have responsibility, and I have authority to communicate with people, because Nike has a name and it can open doors. And what can I make that I can benefit as a person mentally, and that would also help the brand succeed? I mean, what's the intersection of these two? I mean, the thing that will make me happy as a person and satisfied, and the thing that will make the brand happy and successful. And I try to find that intersection point always when I was doing my marketing work. For example, I mean, just to give an example,
yes, please.
I was using dance. I was dancing. I started dancing after a certain age, and I understood that it gave me another level of confidence as a woman in life. And I saw that it happened to some other women and some young women, actually, in Turkey too. And I said, I mean, this is a sport at the end of the day, and I feel that something is changing in me when I dance. And at that time, I was doing marketing for women in Turkey. So I was the lead of marketing for women in Turkey. And I said, okay, I mean, if this can bring me confidence, and it's a sport at the end of the day, then why don't we do a dance campaign that would, help people introduce themselves to dance? So we started a dance campaign where we were, inviting people, women from different cities, to dance with us, come and dance with us. So, and the thing is that it was so refreshing for the brand, because at that time dance was not as popular as it is now. It's now, all Gen Z, there was no TikTok at that time. There was no dance in our lives.
Yes.
And it also gave a fresh perspective to the brand, and another opportunity for the brand to connect with young women. And it also gave me an opportunity to, make something that matters for me. I was enjoying dance. I was so into dance, and I knew that it changed something in me, and it's going to change something in other women too. So that was like a win-win for both sides. So this is an example, and I always, whenever I do work, I always try to find those intersections between my work and my personal fulfillment and personal satisfaction about life. So like working with a purpose, let's say.
Wonderful.
That's a really good question, and I'll tell you the funny part of the story. There's two funny parts of the story. One is I was working for a corporation, a subsidiary of a corporation, doing leadership development and marketing, and they were divesting, I would actually say, and closing some of their subsidiaries. So I got to keep some of the contracts I was working on, and I thought, well, I will just do consulting for a little while and look for a job. And so I just kept calling myself Janice Perkins Consulting. And I kind of got woken up in the middle of the night. I'm a very faith-based person. And I kind of got woken up in the night, and I felt like the Lord was saying, you should name it. If you don't name it, it's not real. And I was like, okay, that's true. I'm kind of dodging that I started a business. I'm pretending. And so there were some relationships going on in my life at that point. And I felt like the conversations around those relationships were, there was a constant theme of capacity, what capacity I had or what I needed, what capacity people had to give. And I started realizing that we limit our own capacity. Our mindset limits our resources, right? We only have so many hours in a day and two hands, and the speed that this computer will go or how good this camera will stay on. But in essence, what I have to give other people in impact is much more infinite, because my heart has the ability and my character and my reputation to expand tenfold based on my network, based on my resources, and based on what I have to give. You know, one of the examples I use in training all the time is I know a woman in her 90s who has like 27 great-grandchildren. And she didn't have to go have surgery to love those great-grandchildren more. Her heart just automatically loved, right? And I think sometimes we take for granted how much hope and love can impact our world, that we can always have more to give. We don't have to have training for that. Our heart can do the work. And in essence, when we can do that, we actually have more steadfast ability to process and have optimal outcome in just what we do in our gifts and talents. So I decided to call it capacity, so I get to talk about it all the time, and how we limit our own capacity based on our mindset and our families of origin and our workplaces, and sometimes our distressors that really impact us, right? When we focus on the things that go wrong, then we're not focusing on the things that are going right, and all of a sudden our negative outlook changes our capacity for the day. So it just makes the work fun for me that then everyone always asks, why do you name it that? And I get to talk about it. It makes me excited. Thank you.
Well, that's the power pause, really, because without pausing, we will just think the same thoughts over and over and over and over. We will just basically run the same tape in the background. And so the way the mind works is the mind keeps asking questions. And then the question that we ask ourselves is very often why not questions. We ask ourselves, why is this not working? Why is that not working? Why are you not doing this? Why am I not doing this? Why is it not? Why not? So we ask ourselves why not questions. And so, because I've always been really curious about how we think better, right? And that's what the book is about, right? Too. It's like, how do we actually use our mind better? And partly because for my mother, right? She was always thinking. Her thinking was always so-called in the pothole. She was always thinking about what wasn't working. And that is when we're under stress, cortisol increases, it floods our mind, and we always think about what's not working. We think based on what we're scared of. We want to know if we're safe, right? Mm-hmm. Do I belong comes later, when we can start calming down. We start cultivating that human connection. We start wanting to belong. And then we can start thinking even better, because now dopamine kicks in. We can start becoming constructive and creative, because we're starting to let go and not be constantly engaged. That's again why we need the power pause. If we're constantly engaged, we don't actually allow that space for dopamine to release and for us to get new ideas. So all of those things are part of how the mind thinks. And so power pausing is really crucial and essential for us to not get stuck in the same loop over and over and over. And so when you talk to friends, for example, who keeps telling you the same story over and over, who keep telling you what they're concerned about, our mind just does that. That's what the mind does. It just keeps repeating the same freaking story over and over, day by day by day. And I think research says that we have the same thoughts. 90% of our thoughts are the same every day as they were the day before. So you can see how we need to pause to actually let new thoughts come in, right? So mindfulness training, really understanding how the mind works. My studies of hypnotherapy, also really understanding what happens the way we ask questions, because the mind will answer the question you ask it. So if you're asking why something is not working, your mind will only think about why it's not working. But if you say, okay, I acknowledge this is not working, let it be, and then ask, what do I need so I can make it work? Now you're telling your mind what to focus on, and your mind will do that for you. And so now you're thinking about how to solve a problem. Now you're thinking better. Now you're thinking with curiosity. You're thinking with, what do I need so I can do that? So if you're asking a question, make sure you actually want to find that answer. And that's one of the reasons why I said earlier, it's important that we look for the questions rather than looking for the answers first. And that is how we think better, by looking for the questions first. But let them be questions that actually become stepping stones towards the problem you want to solve. Rather than questions that are all focused in the pothole of what you're trying to avoid.
One of the things that it taught me is I need to be more self-aware. Whenever I was a very young officer, I got myself into a lot of trouble because I was trying to be somebody that I was not. It wasn't successful. I didn't stand out. And I had to really look in on myself and what I was doing to be a better leader. And like I said, I'd messed up pretty badly, in those first couple of years because I was trying a leadership style that wasn't mine. Everybody around me, they were yellers, and I'm not a yeller. I'm very empathetic. I like to listen. I like to pull a team together and get all of their ideas, and maybe we can come up with a better strategy. It wasn't until I got a mentor that recognized this and said, hey, you're leading the wrong way. And he basically made me sit down and think about, what am I good at? I'm good at listening. I'm good at trying to get everybody on the same page and pull their ideas. And that's when things really started to click. But it wasn't until that time when I started to become more self-aware that didn't really happen. And that's what I've used throughout my entire career. I just was able to retire as a Commodore of a regiment of 1,800 people. And I've kept that with me, is that I know what my strengths are. And I think that there's people out there and they feel so uncomfortable with the way that they're having to lead other people. They're probably doing it wrong. Really take a step back for a minute and understand who you are and what your strengths are. And then you can apply those going forward. But if you're trying to be somebody that you're not, you know what? Everybody's going to see right through you. You're probably going to lose the trust of the people around you. So take that step back and really self-analyze who you are and what those strengths will be.
Great question. So the first one is the art of asking questions. So practice questions. When I first started practicing asking questions, I used to write them I'm a note taker. I used to write a whole lot of questions in the margin of my book as little guides and prompts to me to help me grow my questioning capability. And so questions are really important, and learning the different types of questions, the difference between what questions and why questions. So really get good at questions. Questions are a currency of leadership. They're definitely a currency of change. So I think that's really a skill to spend time on. Going in hand with asking good questions is learning how to listen so that people feel heard. And a very common request of me is, when I go into an organization, do you think you can just get the leaders to learn how to listen? Like, could they learn how to listen? So I really think that those two things are foundational human skills. They're certainly foundational leadership skills, and they are really important for change. Because if we're sort of in between the project and the business, or if we're in a coaching, or there's some form of question and being able to listen and translate that information between people, that's really important. So I'd start there. And then I'd also say work on facilitation. So the root word of facilitation is to make easy. So have a think about every meeting that you have a chance to lead. How do you design it in a way that makes it easy for participants to feel safe, to learn how to participate, to do that work collaboratively? I think that those three things would be great starting points and great ways that you can add that into your work. And no matter where you are in the workforce at the moment, you've got opportunities. And if you go to meetings and you think you can improve them, offer up your ideas. Like, offer up. Nobody has ever said no when I've said, hey, I've got some great ideas about how you could do that meeting a bit differently. Would you be interested in a conversation about that? They're like, yeah, sure. So be courageous. Offer your help. Offer your help to people.
I didn't choose it, actually. So it was, I got into the financial sector by chance. So I wanted to be a diplomat. So I was the first person in my family to go to university, which was a great honor and also a great responsibility. And I thought it would be a wonderful way to honor my parents, as well as to feed my sense of my need for adventure, to become a diplomat. And in Belgium, you can try attempt the exams 3 times in your lifetime. And at the time, it was a set of 10 exams. And it was only a pass or a fail. It wasn't you didn't have a percentage. You either passed the exam or you failed. And if you failed an exam, you were out for that year. So that was your first of 3 options or opportunities that was missed. And I failed the exam number 4. And so I was really disappointed. I came home to my father and just explained that I had failed. And he said, so what are you going to do next? And I said, I'll try again next year. And he looked at me and said, no. What are you going to do now? Next year is next year, but what are you going to do now? Obviously, my father's idea was, you want to get a job? I knew that was the right answer. And unfortunately, it was, again, another economic crisis. So there weren't that many jobs going in Belgium. And again, this was before the internet. So you had, I remember looking at the newspapers for job adverts. And my father said, that is not how you get a job, right? You just have to be more proactive, not reactive. And I thought, what does that mean? And I remember thinking, what does that mean? And then we had a conversation where he asked me what I was interested in. And I said, well, I like speaking English. Obviously, my mother tongue is French, but I wanted to work in English. And I wanted a job where I would have the opportunity to travel. And then to give me the telephone books, with the business telephone book. And he said, well, go through that and try to identify from the ads, try to identify the companies that speak in English and where the headquarters are abroad, where you could travel. And so I started just going through that book, and I came across, thankfully, letter E, Euroclear. And the way it presented itself, even in a telephone directory, I thought was quite interesting. So I started doing a little bit of research on that. And I really like that company before joining. So basically, I wrote a letter with my, proactively with my CV saying, I've got just education, a lot of enthusiasm, zero experience. Will you hire me? And again, my father said, if you send it, the answer will be no. You have got to find someone to give it to. And I thought, how do you find someone to give it to? I don't know anybody there. So I did some research again. I found someone in human resources, and I phoned them, and thankfully they were the hiring people. And I phoned them, and they politely said, well, we don't have a job for you now, but send us your CV, and then we'll contact you. And then I remember what my father said. He said, if you've got no experience, if you send them the CV, they'll say no. So basically what I did was I took my bicycle, I printed my CV, I took my bicycle, and I went to the place, to that company, and I asked for that lady that I spoke to on the phone. And I wanted to give her my CV. And basically I had to wait half an hour because she was busy. And then she came and she was quite frustrated, going, who are you? What, I'm not expecting you. And I said, well, we spoke on the phone before, and you said I was very enthusiastic and that's the sort of people you were looking for. So I thought I would just hand you over my CV. And actually my father was absolutely right. She looked at me and she said, so where do you come from? And I said, well, I'm living about 15 kilometers away. And she said, and how did you get here? Because it was not there. I said, I cycled. And she said, so you really want to work here? I said, absolutely. And I got an interview the next week. So my father was absolutely right in telling me, explaining to me in a very cryptic fashion that you had to make yourself memorable. Now, as I said, I didn't choose financial services. I just chose that company. And thankfully, his guidance helped me be noticed for the right reasons. And I got a job, I think it was in the operations team. And I had no idea what it was about. All I knew was that I needed a job, and I got a job, and that's it.
The secret sauce, that's a big question here. I would say, what I have learned over the years, and it might have been already in my story, I have changed a little bit from a very rational approach, from believing very much in facts and figures and numbers. I have moved over the years towards an approach that is much more comfortable with, I would say, uncertainty and serendipity and coincidence, and accept that some things might just happen. And I think one important approach or aspect over the years is really that for me more and more I see the importance really of people and the people side, and engage with different people, engage in building relationships with people and in networks of relationships, and that's much more important than engaging too much in the facts and figures and numbers, and so that's something that's, I think, a shift in approaching things and seeing an importance behind that I could recognize over the years. So let's say a little bit from a very rational approach to a more emotional approach over the years. I wouldn't say that this has been a very, let's say, an approach that I intended to do purposefully. I think it happened. It happened over the years because of my work, because of engaging a lot with different people, because of facing more and more situations, maybe not as extreme as with the Hurricane Katrina, but situations where you just realize there are many situations out there. And I think strategic management is such an area. There is not necessarily a right or wrong. It is not based only on facts and figures, because ultimately, even if we talk about strategy, those that are enacting strategy, through their actions, through their behavior, those are the people. And the more you engage with this topic, you realize there's always this people side behind, and you just realize that some things
can't be explained based on figures and facts. So I think it was a big learning process, not necessarily done intentionally, but just something that happened over the years. Also through those events that happened in our environment. I mean, we had I was definitely shaped by my experience with Katrina, but then also through having a family on my own, having 2 kids, doing my becoming a professor at the same time. Those are all influences and personal influences, engaging much more with people. And then, of course, the pandemic over the last years has forced us to come back and focus on ourselves more and the people that are around us and how we engage with them. So I think it has been a learning based on many influence factors.
Wow, thanks for sharing.
Everyone's starting point is different, but I think it's about the goal that you feel like you don't have all the ingredients to do it. So maybe you don't have the money that you need, you don't have the expertise that you need, you don't have the connections that you need, you don't have the infrastructure that you need. Like there's something, a missing ingredient. And so therefore you feel a little bit like you have no business wanting it. It's a little bit like you guys telling me what you wanted to be when you grew up as kids, you know. But as kids, somehow we don't frighten. You want to be an astronaut. I'm not afraid of that. We don't get frightened by those dreams, right? The other thing I think that where it relates to that on some level is you're not an astronaut today. So it's not a goal. A big, gorgeous goal to me is not a destination. It is a journey to something big, magnificent, something magnificent that we need to fulfill who we are. And so, you know, that journey is also about you're going somewhere really big. It might be here where you think it is, but it might be over here. And so over time, you need the small pieces, the small bite-sized pieces or goals that help you get there. And you need to, like, you know, you're walking up the mountain, you can't look at the top all the time because it looks really far away, right? So you look up and it still looks really far away, but you can look behind you and see where you've come from. And when you look and see where you've come from, you realize you're making a lot of progress. But sometimes you need to like recalibrate a little bit how you're getting to the top. And so that's where I think, you know, it is a process. And depending on, you know, the kind of goal you set, it can take weeks, months, or years to get there. Yeah.
Julie,
well, I think it's about letting down the boundaries of, you know, what makes you feel safe. So do I feel a little bit scared about this goal? Do I feel a lot scared about this goal? Do I know how to start? And so, you know, I think it's that piece of, or do I know, you know, how do I like leverage the people I know? How do I leverage the things I know? How do I leverage the team I have into new territory? And so it's sort of like one of the things I think you need to also do to set these kinds of big, gorgeous goals is around, you know, clearing space in your life, in your calendar. You know, you do have to say no to other things to be able to like have the brain space to think about these kinds of goals.
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I think you should write a book on that subject. Just collect all of that, because you're right. Our capacity to think is diminishing. You know, our ability to focus and attend to things for any length of time. I mean, we just are so now programmed to multitask and jump from thing to thing. It's really hard. So a couple of things that I know I do for myself is my thinking time tends to be earlier in the day. If I get up quite early, so before the rush of the day begins, I've got a little bit of that quiet time for contemplation. But the other thing that I will do is time box thinking. So if I know I need to figure something out, I will put it on the calendar and set a timer for 30 minutes. And I won't allow myself, and you know, when you know there's an end point, when you know the buzzer will go off and you can move on to something else, there's something about that creates more of an appetite for focusing, at least for myself. And so when I know I've got this 30 minutes, I can be heads down. I won't look at email. I won't look at my texts. I can just figure this out. There's that level of intensity that I can bring to it, I find is much greater than if I just, let myself lollygag around all day trying to do the same thing. And then the other thing, it's interesting. I hadn't really thought about this till you mentioned it, but we just came back from a vacation. We went to Africa for a couple of weeks and got to go on safari. And before going to Africa, I created a thinking list. So the things that had been kind of in the back of my mind that I hadn't been able to attend to, that required some creative juices, I put together a list of things just to think about while I was away. So it wasn't like heavy to-dos, I wasn't creating any deliverables, but I had to think about how I wanted to approach a few things. And it was interesting because in the space that we had over the course of the vacation, there were moments where I was able to come to conclusions about things. And I think I had 8 things on my thinking list. I probably came back with 5 that I was able to cross off.
And what I didn't mention before was that I did a lot of personal work, and I think that has helped me. I mean, I don't think I would be here at the moment doing what I do if I hadn't done that work before. So I was in a very long relationship with my high school sweetheart, and I just don't think I knew myself. And the relationship defined me a lot. And I was like, who is Kajsa and what do I want to do? So I needed to do that for myself, to just be on my own. And this is when I was 25 and started kind of just exploring myself, not just who I am, but who I want to be. And maybe this is also rooted in Finnish people. We can be a little realistic and pessimistic, and I wanted to have more positive way of thinking. I mean, this is also studied, like how as humans we still have the flight or flight mode, and of our thinking, I think it's like 65% is negative, because we are always in that alert mode. So we really need to do the work in order to think in a more positive, optimistic way. So I was doing the work that who I am as a person, and also working on my mindset. And once I did that, the world really opened for me. So I was telling myself that it's good to be realistic, feet on the ground, and not imagining and dreaming too high, and not having just head on the clouds, but do something like what is reasonable and safe. And I think we are kind of maybe thought that way, at least we were back then, and it's very easy to just follow this path, like you study, you get a great job, you get married and have kids and work until you retire. And it's very easy to go on this path without really maybe thinking what it is that I really want. a lot of my clients, for example, they have just followed that what is available for them, and they've received job offers that they just go without maybe thinking more that is it aligned with their values and priorities. And so but to say that this inner work really changed me a lot, and I think that was the foundation that then allowed me to kind of explore the curiosity and have that courage, because I knew myself more. So over the years, and especially when I was doing that, my career planning and what I want to do next, I also developed a vision, like what it is that I want to see in the world. And I think that's a very good question for anyone who wants to explore, like, for example, meaning and what is like my purpose and calling is like, okay, how do I want to see the world in the future, and what is my role, what is my contribution to that? So I really wanted to help people, because I feel that it's so sad that most people, I don't know what are the latest statistics, but let's say at least 85% of people are not engaged and excited in their work, which is very sad to me, because we work so much. Why not enjoy that? And that's why I did a lot of career coaching. But it's like I mentioned before, it's not only that we put all the effort into our career, but how do we harmonize with the other interests that we have, our personal growth, our social relationships, and love and family and friends, and love of learning, or like other hobbies, and just the environment we live in. So there's so many aspects, and I believe the happiness comes from that we really like put attention to all our priorities and interests. And it's I guess it's so easy to get caught into like, okay, what is my professional purpose as well, and pursue that.
Divest before you invest.
Divest before you invest. Yes.
Success is as much about what you take away as what you add. So if I need to immerse myself in doing deep work or deep thinking or creating something original, whether that's a blog post or a book chapter or a presentation for a customer, I need to divest of some of the noise and other commitments to make room for that, right? This means fewer meetings, not more meetings. This means fewer commitments, not more commitments. So first is, what are you going to divest of from your calendar and commitments to make room for this deep thinking to happen? The second is read voraciously. I mean, whatever topic you're trying to think deeply about, read blogs, read books, ask people who are experts in that field, expose yourself to a variety of ideas so that you could potentially be the person who takes all of those inputs or data points and then sees them or brings us a new concept from them.
Wow.
And then another aspect of deep thinking is testing your thought process with other people who don't think like you. So with each one of my books, there have been people who I don't know who they are, who read it before it comes out and provide feedback about how to improve it, or what resonated or what didn't. That helps shape my thought process about how to tell a story or how to offer a tool to help someone get their own results.
Wow.
at its core, design thinking is a creative problem-solving tool. And so no time in history, in my opinion, has there been more problems for business leaders to solve than there are today.
Yes.
You know, whether they be outside market conditions, disruptive competitors, regulatory environments, pandemics, you know, the rapid change of technology, you know, that leaders are bombarded left and right with problems to solve. And so much to the degree that it's very easy for them to lose sight of what their vision is for their organization. And so whenever an organization begins to lose sight of the vision that they have for their organization or their team, depending on the leader, and they begin to focus on all the problems, those problems overwhelm them, they overcome them, and I think that's very much the headspace of a lot of leaders today. Is they're overwhelmed, they're stressed, they're, you know, a number of different qualifying descriptions that you know, they're so busy putting out today's fire that, you know, they have to postpone thinking about their vision. And for me, design thinking is a combination of those two. We bring them back together because, you know, I never considered myself a philosopher, but I believe it was Seneca said, the obstacle is the way, and that is the truth. Though all those problems are the way to the vision, but design thinking is a way to bring those two, and how do we work with them? How do we have the vision, but then work over the obstacles so that they just dissolve upon themselves, which is what I think design thinking does brilliantly. So to me, it's innovation from the inside out. You know, a lot of companies today, they have, if they can afford it, they will have an innovation team, and they'll be all about the customers and their needs and creating innovation. And that is one way to do it. And there are many organizations that are very successful at doing it. The way I see innovation is more as an ecosystem, and that's creating innovation from the inside out. And a number of companies are starting to do this more and more today. Ford being one of them, Apple, obviously. You know, design-led companies outperform the S&P by 228%. And so to me, innovation from the inside out, or creating an innovation ecosystem, is really about maximizing the talents of the individuals within the organization, giving them the opportunity to thrive and to bring their own creativity and experience to the problems and the vision that the company has, and then removing all the obstacles and hindrances that keep them from reaching their full potential. And when you do that, you know, I believe it was Kennedy that was quoted of saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. And so when you rise the tide of the employees within the organization, there's nothing that stops the tide from rising for the organization itself.
Well, that's interesting. You know, I think the most important thing is to give yourself space to think. And it is so difficult, you know, our world, there is so many things going on, right? It's a constant fire of work to do, tasks. And one of the things that we really work on in our own business, in our own lives, and help our clients with is, what is the most important thing? You know, because you're not going to accomplish everything equally well. And so if you can structure your thinking on what is the most important thing, or for our clients, what are the 3 most important things they can do strategically as a business, and then to think critically about those 3 things, and to be willing to say, yeah, and we're not going to do this, and we're not going to do that, and we're going to stop doing this, and we're going to take a moment and really think about how do we do this well. And sometimes that really that takes a lot of courage, because you could be down a path of something and then the world shifts And, I know when we shifted with the pandemic, it was like we had to stop and think, because 90% of our work was in person. And I watched our calendars we are launching a book, and all the conferences that I was supposed to sell books at 500 and 1,000 at a time all got wiped off of our, so you can either be like, oh no, we just failed. Or you could say, all right, let's think about this. What has become the most important thing? And I'm like, well, what's become the most important thing is not creating a best-selling book, because I'm not going to sell it at the volume. But what's the most important thing is using these Courageous Cultures tools to help transform organizations of a time of critical need. And so we didn't sell as many books as I had hoped, although it's still selling. It's doing pretty good. But we have done is sold, really big culture change initiatives, which is a lot more fun than selling books, So I think that's the thing is, do you really know what matters most? And that would be my biggest advice for anybody in terms of teaching critical thinking. And my second thing is, it's very interesting as people come to us and say, my team doesn't think critically. We hear that all the time. I don't know, they just don't have it. They don't have that competency. Most of the time, when I dig underneath that, it's that they don't have enough strategic information to think critically. Be really making sure people understand your business. If you want them to think, make sure they get it, and how you make money, and why your values matter, and what your brand is for your customers. Because if you say, I find that even with our own team, sometimes they'll want to do something, and I'm like, no, but that's my fault. If they think that's a good idea, then that's my fault, because they don't fully understand really where we're headed, and so I have to own that to help them think more critically.
Enhanced listening is primarily focused on the future. What's going to happen? How can I make that happen? How can I do this a different way? Heart listening is very much in the present, very much tuned into what's happening right here and right now, tuning into what's going on right in front of me, and really tuning into facial expression, vocal tone, gestures, body language, what's happening underneath the spoken words. That's very much involved in the present. Head listening is oftentimes involved in the past. What's already been proven, what's already known, what are the facts that have already been established. So what's happened in the past? What kinds of patterns are already in place? So we need all three of these. Most of us are not adept in all three, but it's well worth knowing the modality that we're weakest in. And for me, unfortunately, it's head listening. But fortunately, my husband is a good head listener. And when I decide to partner and collaborate on projects, I make sure that I have an adept head listener in the room, because they will pick up on stuff that I, as a hands listener, am not. So it starts to become interesting. It starts to I know that when I'm focused on how I'm listening, that I'm slowing myself down, and I'm paying attention and expanding my radar about what I'm perceiving. My perceptual radar is definitely being expanded when I slow myself down and listening. There's actually a chapter in the book that I took a risk in putting in, but I started to get curious again about how listening really serves certain high stakes professions. And so I chapter 10 is about listening to save your life. Listening
as a skill in conflict negotiation. Listening is a skill when you're trying to talk somebody out of taking his own life. Listening is a skill when you're a CIA operative going undercover. It's listening on steroids, really, because you have to. Listening when you're in danger, when you're in a trapped situation. What happens and how you have to amplify your listening skills in order to survive. So that again, I'm obviously not a conflict hostage negotiator or a CIA operative, but I'm looking at this as an opportunity to really explore and ask questions and dig in to some other people's experiences.
I could say I'm tenacious. Some may say I'm stubborn. I have learned throughout my life that when you have a specific goal, you need to be flexible around it. So things may change. And if I stay in that space of what does that goal actually give me or give others, then I feel I can achieve the goal. So in my past, I've dealt, like many others, I've dealt with, struggles, low points in my life. Personally, I've had a couple of serious illnesses, and I've learned a lot through those experiences about what's important to me, what I want to hold on to, and what I need to let go of. So it's not necessarily the position or the title. That's not what's important to me. What's important to me is the environment and how I show up. And so I think those skills that has taught me, and also I have to credit the people along the journey that came along the journey with me. My parents have always been very supportive. And my father always said to me, life's not easy. If you know that, then you can get the most out of it. And it's true. And my mother always taught me that there will be high points and low points, and to really experience everything, because joy, which is one of my main values, something I pursue in life, professionally, personally, you can't experience joy if you haven't experienced hardship. You can't appreciate joy if you haven't experienced other moments. So really getting a lot out of those other moments. And that has helped me not be single focused, but adapt and flex as long as I'm sticking true to that larger goal.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So if you think about it at different levels, an organization might have values, right? We've seen all of those. Sometimes they're named, but they're not lived within the organization. Sometimes it is really, truly a part of the culture. And what I find is that when we identify our individual values, there is a mapping or something that we need to do to see, where do my values align to the organization's? And I think that's a really important point of reflection. And a lot of people, that's what it was in the pandemic, right? It was like, hey, I thought I was aligned with the organization's values, but maybe I'm really not. And so I think the same is true at then the leadership level. So as a leader, are you, what is the culture that you create, and how are you showing up for your people? And do your values, at the company level and at the leader level, then emphasize for your people what's important to them? It doesn't always have to be aligned one for one, right? So, but as long as there's a little bit of overlap, and that shared overlap might just be the shared company values that you have, right? And what I find that with people that are fulfilled and are more so aligned with at least one or more of the company values, right? And so we can all agree on, we love the mission, right? Or we love how we get the mission done, or things like that. So it's important, I think, for diversity in everything that we do, that we do. So I don't want everybody's values to be the same. What I do want leaders to know and to share is their values, how those show up, and the idea is then modeling your values. And so, I might even have the same values as some of my direct reports, but they mean different things to different people. But I want the idea is to model your values, whatever they are. So if my value is health and wellness, and that's important to me, and I model that for my team, then it gives them the permission to model their own values and to prioritize their own values. So their value doesn't have to be health and wellness too. It could be compassion. It could be family. It could be making an impact in the community, or adventure, or creativity. But the idea here is that I'm modeling my own values, which then in turn lets others do the same. And hopefully, if we start to chip away at some of this, you have to be perfect all the time. You have to, be 100% on all the time. We're all humans. The pandemic has brought us into our living rooms, our workspaces. We've seen our dogs and our families and our kids run around. And so that I think is one of the benefits of pandemic. But this idea of showing up as yourself, hopefully we can start to bring more authenticity into our organizations, into our leadership. When we're not sure about something, when if we can start modeling some of these behaviors, then it gives permission for your teams to do it too. So I'm not really interested in people having the same values. I want people to show up within their values so that they can then build these cultures of inclusion so that other people can show up in theirs as well.
Okay, I'm going to answer this through a side door, because you also asked about the food company I started, and I think I can connect those two. So in 2011, so for all my life, I've never lost, like when I was a kid with my dad, we had big gardens, we had cows and pigs and chickens, and the purpose for all of that was to feed our family. And he just had a passion for as much self-sufficiency as we could create while still being out in the world and working and having jobs and things. And so I never lost that connection to growing my own food and preparing food and living, now it's got a name like Whole Foods, plant-based diet. And I don't eat much animal products at all anymore, but at the time when I was younger I did. But Whole Foods was just the way people ate. They grew stuff in their garden, they had animals for meat, and that's how they ate. There wasn't all the processed foods and things when my dad was growing up. And so I had always, even if wherever I lived, even if I just had a container with some lettuce in it, I was always looking for, like, where's the sun? What can I grow? Even in a little jar or container. So when Robert and I got married and we had our own place, I started growing a garden again and getting back into growing my own food and cooking from that during the summer months. That's why spring, I just love spring, and the garden gets started in the spring, so that's part of why it's one of my favorite seasons, And all that to say, so I was very aware of my own desire to eat well and to nourish my body well, and research was just coming out about, this was like around 2010 to 2011, so much research had started to come out about epigenetics. So, we might have, like, my family has tons of heart disease all over the place in it. I had my first really high cholesterol test result when I was 25. And that was the early days of, like, hey, maybe there's something we can do about this. Maybe just having the genetics for things like heart disease or whatever doesn't mean we have to get it, or we have to get it as quickly, or like maybe we can do something through diet and lifestyle. So a lot of my older brothers and sisters had struggled with cholesterol early on and were on drugs and medication, and this new idea of prevention had just come out. And so I was on that early. And so when it was about 2011, I had a good friend who really values health and well-being, but she had a corporate job, very demanding corporate job, and her work, the lifestyle she lived because of her work was not a match for eating really well, especially when she needed convenience and food quickly and didn't have a whole lot of time or energy to go to the grocery store and to plan her meals and to cook all the meals and chop all the vegetables. And so it made me mad. I just like, why is it that we're learning so much about the fact that we can actually reverse disease, keep disease at bay, change the course of our family history in one generation, literally, show future generations a different way to be with food and our bodies and all of that. And yet my friend can't, when she turns to the food system that we have in America, at least, it gives her everything but what she wants, but it is fast and it is convenient. So it just made me angry. And I thought, somebody needs to do something about this. This is ridiculous. I stomped around, very self-righteously for a while. And then one day it's kind of like my coach self woke up and was like, hey, what if you were someone? What would it look like if you did this? And, I had cholesterol and heart disease issues to think about. I had been diagnosed with arthritis a year or two before that. So there were things in my own body, and I was learning how to eat well for myself. And I thought, well, if I created something, here's what it would look like. Again, way before the days of DoorDash and Grubhub and all the delivery services. There was one prepared food delivery service in Charlotte at the time, and it was very much like the way my dad ate growing up: meat, potatoes, starches, heavy, lots of butter, lots of dairy. And at the time I was pretty much almost totally plant-based. So I designed this business and I showed it to people who were smart, and they said, no one's doing all of this. It was plant-based, gluten-free, processed sugar-free, local farmers, sourcing local farmers, or as organic as we could make it. And so long story short, I met my business partner while I was running a pilot and testing the idea, and she's a chef, and so we started this company called Nourish. They just celebrated their 10-year anniversary, and it was Charlotte's first ever plant-based, beautiful, delicious, hearty food, surprisingly delicious, and oh, I want more of that. It was not rabbit food. It wasn't like just salads. So I sold my part of the company to her in 2014, but I'm now, I've been coaching them and supporting the business in ways that I work now. All this goes back to the shared humanity piece of, I think that when I put myself in a position of causing something to happen that had people in our community connecting more with where they spent their money was on a local business that supported local farmers, that brought cleaner food to their doorstep, that allowed them to feed their family in a way that they knew supported the whole community. We got our packaging from local vendors, partnered with other businesses to help give them some visibility. It just brought the whole system closer, and we loved, part of my job was getting the food to the people, getting people to the food, the marketing, the community building, and that was a big message. One of our messages was convenience doesn't have to mean compromise, and that, really, we didn't use this language, but I love this saying, all ships rise with the tide. We can have a conscious consumer experience that we know supports everything around us. I mean, life in this earth, and we are all a part of a living system that is so much more vast than we can even fathom. And so even in these small ways to support that, I think that really woke me up again to, okay, yeah, I could do something about this. And in my coaching, knowing that when I worked with clients, whatever we were working on for them, one of the consistent things that would happen is that they would, whatever their last conversation was, they would walk out the door knowing who they were, like knowing what their thread in the great tapestry of life was about, at least more, and being able to speak that and make choices in their lives based on that. And so they would then be more confident, and they would walk with their head held high and their shoulders back and be taller and know their place in this whole system of life, and at least know more about it. And so I knew that whoever they interacted with after that got a different experience of that person, that thread in the tapestry, and that made a difference, you know. So I think it's always been a part of who I am, thanks to my dad, and gratefully I've found my way through my work life such that I can support that elsewhere through the people that I can impact.
I think often it's because, first of all, the people who rise to those very senior levels are type A people, very performance driven. Somebody in a session I did last week in Austin referred to them as coin operated, as if it's just like, tell me what you're going to pay me for and I'll do that. And unfortunately, our measurement systems, for the most part, are very differentiated between different people. So like, look, I'm not paid for that, so I'm not going to worry about it. So what they are paid for, they're very controlling about, and they may overstep and they may force, and that's not pretty. And things that they aren't paid for, they pay way too little attention to, and they aren't helpful with. So I think we have a lot of coin operated leaders. And you know, it's just kooky to think that people would be anything different and even if it's not money, even if they're just very performance oriented and ambitious and they want to perform well, companies have told them that performing well means your piece performing well. So they do anything they can to make sure their piece performs well. And, you know, who cares what happens to everybody else? So it's a failure of planning and measurement and rewards from the very top down. And I would say, you know, I get pretty frustrated. Even I've been writing this month on LinkedIn about strategy and the lack of strategy. And somebody just said, well, in a publicly traded company where every month and every quarter you're rewarded and hounded and look under a microscope at your results, how could we expect anybody to be strategic? So I think not even just within the company are we measuring and rewarding the wrong behaviors, but as an economy, we're measuring and rewarding the wrong behaviors. So it's not something that one poor leader can solve on their own, because it's a whole system that's really measuring things for the benefit of the very short term. And even in our society, you know, the kind of companies that we're rewarding are companies that are, you know, maybe good in the short term, but doing long run damage and harm to our environment, our communities, our society. So we've kind of got it all messed up.
Yeah, it's a great question. The first thing I'll share with you is that there are periods of time where, you know, our organization is called Being First in support of conscious change leadership, the being part. It's not just about being number one, it's about the being, your way of being that you bring. And there have been periods of time where I have jokingly, even with clients, said, no, we need to rename the name of the company to Doing First. You know, the times when we just get so busy and so, you know, so time pressured, and clients have this need, and producing new trainings have this need, and all of that. Dean and I both get up early in the morning to have quiet. And, you know, whether it's for meditation purposes, exercise purposes, taking care of the animals, you know, it's a very, very important time. And it's a precursor to thinking.
So for myself, I have a pattern where I typically wake up about 45 minutes before I have to get out of bed. You know, there are exceptions to that. You know, I got to catch a plane or whatever. But usually I give myself time. And that time for me, when I'm, you know, semi-lucid, I'm not asleep, but I'm pondering things. That's a very important time for me to think. And it's also a very important time for that intuitive voice to show up with guidance. And so it's really creating the conditions where quiet thought can occur. So, you know, if I'm tuned in and I'm listening throughout the day, sometimes deep thoughts will show up. But for the most part, it's really crafting that space in my life so that I can actually reflect on things. Now, I will also share that having conversations with like-minded people, whether it's Dean or a few other friends, synergy occurs in conversation for me frequently. And so I can have breakthrough in my thinking because I'm talking about it with others. And so that's also another option. That's true, you know, the extrovert side of me, although I'm more and more introverted the older I get. But that allows that synergy to occur in conversation with others, assuming those others are also deep thinkers.
How can we be more mindful before we respond? We pause. We pause. So we don't have to respond to the email straight away first thing in the morning. Think about it. And I don't think we pause enough. We're scrolling our phones. It's next. We don't sit with ourselves. We don't reflect. We don't, you know, I was talking yesterday about our kids being bored. They're not bored. They're given a device to scroll. They're constantly getting this stimulation, and we do the same. And so pausing, reflecting, tease it out with somebody, talk about it. I heard somebody say, you know, I didn't want to talk about it. I wanted to, you know, I was using the same brain to try and fix the problem, that the brain that caused the problem, you know? So why not share it with somebody and get that support, get a second brain, get a second heart to support you. And that can be professional, but that could also be, you know, a really good peer, somebody, you know, so tease it out, pause. So how do we stop ourselves from acting impulsively out of our unconscious emotions or our blind spots, as you said? And I've been doing this myself, whether it was parenting, whether it was working, whether it was just in my social life, whatever. If something really gets me, that's it, I want to just tell them or whatever, I go, okay, what's happening for me right now? How am I right now? What is this? Is this really about that email and the way I've read it? And so much, as you know, can get lost in translation on email, tone and language, and we could misinterpret something, but also we could see it through our filter of, are they going to find me out? Are they trying to catch me out here? And so it's about pausing, sometimes getting a second opinion, not, you know, having some food, lunch before you reply, or checking, am I really annoyed with this email, or is it because the bus was late? Do you know, really checking, what is this about for me? And I think expressing it is, you know, either writing it down, emailing yourself for private, kind of secure email. But the feelings bit, what's the feeling? I always ask myself, how am I feeling first? So, because sometimes when we say what's happening for me, we think, we try to rationalize, logicalize, make sense of, you know, all that. But it's an emotional, you said it, it's an emotion that gets in the way, an emotional fog. So what am I feeling right now? Where can I feel it in my body? If it's my chest, it's probably a bit of anxiousness. If it's here, I'm getting angry, or, you know, sometimes your body can tell you how you're feeling. And so what's that about? Then you can do the understanding and insight and awareness piece if you start with the feelings rather than the thoughts.
Got it.
So I see it like a triangle. You've got your behaviors, your thoughts, and then your feelings are underneath. There's other versions of graphics online, but that's the way I see it. And your feelings are always there for good reason. Your thoughts might be askew. Your thoughts might be doolally. They could gone off on a tangent. If you feel anxious, your thoughts will spiral and you'll be worried about 2025 before you know it. So you can reel those thoughts in. And I see it like there's two arrows. There's an arrow going from your thoughts to influence your feelings, and from your feelings to influencing your thoughts. And we can work on our thoughts. We can challenge our thoughts. We can see if they're true. We can reel them in. But our feelings are always valid. If we think, if we feel, let me start again. If we think that we're not good enough, or if we're told we're not good enough. So say if we grow up where we're constantly criticised and we feel not good enough. We feel not good enough because of good reason, because we've been told we're not good enough all our lives by our parent or whatever. So that feeling is justified, but it's not fact and it's not permanent. But we'd be justified in thinking then, oh, I'm not going to go for that job because I don't feel good enough. So that bit, I'm not going to go for that job, that can be challenged. But the feeling, I suppose what I do is I do the opposite to what a lot of people try to change their feelings, whereas I try to listen and embrace the feelings, change the thoughts and change the behaviors, but honor the feelings.
Honor the feelings.
Perfect practice is not going to work here. You just have to ask. But I'm going to give you the secret sauce, the secret questions. You ready,
Please. Yes.
How and what? Just about any question can be asked with a how or a what. So any kind of question that I have, and let's say my intention is to write a book. My intention is to write a book. So I could talk to you about, let's say you're an author. I could say, how did you get the idea behind your book? What was your first best next step? What would you say to a brand new author? How would you get started? How would you come up with a table of contents? But see, if I say instead to you, do you know how to write a book? Are you going to say is what? Yep. Nope.
Yes.
Do you know someone I can talk to about writing a book? Nope. But if I say, how would you go about finding someone who knows about writing a book? How would you go about learning this new role in our company? What would you want from someone who is providing these computer services to you? And all of a sudden, the question opens up. It's an open question. And it's kind of pretty much anything somebody throws at you, too. You can say, what? How? So, we want you to solve this problem. What's the problem? What do what else can you tell me about it? How would you like me to solve it? Kind of Wonder Woman's bracelets, right? Anything that you say, you can pretty much say what or how, and people will open up and give you more information. And that's what you need when you're a good negotiator, is what kind of information can I gain?
I think one of the things is allowing yourself time to think. We don't give ourselves time to reflect on ourselves. We reflect on so many other people, but we don't give ourselves time and space to think. Going out, being in nature, taking time to walk amongst the trees or the gardens or the whatever it is, the valleys, taking time to just be by yourself is a rarity nowadays. So it's giving yourself that gift of time to think about yourself. And you can do it in a structured way, but you can just make sure you're actually thinking about you and where you want to go on this journey. Because if you are thinking about that, I know it sounds so self-indulgent, but if you are thinking about yourself in that way and how you can serve the world and how you can serve the people immediately in front of you, it allows you to then say, here's where I need to go next and how I can best be of service. So it's giving the gift of thinking space to yourself without thinking that it's an indulgence that you can't afford. You really need to think about yourself and where you want to go next. So I think it's giving yourself allowing yourself to think, and the time, and getting off all the devices to do so. I think that's a big thing. And that's what I had when I was growing up. I had time. I allowed myself to think about and see myself in the future and imagine myself where I want to be, and seeing myself looking out back on that experience. So not just seeing, me out there as an out of body experience, but me seeing the audience, me interacting with the cameras and being that person. So I think a lot of it is visualization, which I think our brains see it and then, okay, that is a possibility for that person. So those are the things that I'd recommend, is definitely giving yourself space.
Beautiful.
One of the most important things I believe we can do is to communicate, and to communicate, to listen, and to understand. It's not about talking at people; it's about listening and their point of view. Because one of the things I always talk about is perception. Perception is unique. It's a unique to only us. Therefore, it's unique, and it's our personal reality. So, for instance, you're both looking at me on this screen now, and you will be thinking about me differently. And you'll be thinking about me differently because that will be based, your perception of me will be based upon your experiences so far. And your experiences are unique to only each of you. So what you see and hear will be different. But neither of you are wrong. You're both right. So our perception is our only reality. And I think that is, once we understand that everybody is going to listen, hear us differently, see us differently, we start to understand perhaps that there is no one way. And we start to think more. We start to think about that person with a bit more compassion, and the next person and the next person and the next person. So we are thinking about what they might be thinking, and they are right to them. So I think to understand how I actually evolve in the way I think, it is by being very aware of how different people's perceptions are, and to communicate to the point where I ask enough questions to understand better rather than assume too much. So but because communication is the basis of everything. So by thinking like that, we're learning all the time, and that is what the way I would answer that question.
Yeah, humans, the great thing that we could do that is also one of our greatest problems is that we like to, our brains like to take shortcuts to understand things. We live in like a highly complex, environment, and in order to make, good understanding of how to navigate any situation, we take these shortcuts where we categorize. Right? This is good, this is bad. That's scary, don't do that, this is safe. And unfortunately, the downside of taking those shortcuts by sort of like pulling a few patterns in and putting it in this bucket versus this bucket is that sometimes our categories are wrong. And that person is safe, but we are calling them unsafe. That person is good, but we're assuming they're bad. And the only way to undo that is what you said, which is to slow down, reflect, and allow yourself to get back the information you decided to get rid of, and then rethink, are they really bad, or is there something that is upsetting me about this situation? And I can address that without globally making an assumption about that person. Or is that situation really scary, or is it just everything is making me nervous about it, but it's actually a good thing for me to do that thing because I'll grow from it, So that slowing down that you mentioned, and observing how you feel inside, and what, the information that you've sort of gathered on the outside, and sort of restructuring it, decoding and recoding, makes a big difference in kind of how you, grow over time too. Yeah. So I might change the word think to reflect.
Okay.
Because that's really what I think I do in order to make decisions and understand where I'm going next and to slow down. And so, for example, I have this blog on Psychology Today, and it's focused on it's called A New Look at Women's Leadership. And I was writing for maybe a year and a half, constantly. And then the pandemic hit and the racial reckoning in the US, and I started really thinking and reflecting on that. And I started wondering, what is the message that I want to send here? Is this the right message? Is this still the right platform? I really started questioning myself a lot. I started thinking, what is a woman? What is women's leadership? Leadership is leadership. Why am I making it about gender? All of these questions I had to sit with for quite a while, and I spun and I read a lot, and I asked a lot of people's thoughts, and I just stopped writing. I went into kind of a writing cocoon, because I did not want to continue without having more clarity about where I wanted to take this and whether this was the right path. So I emerged a couple of times with a couple of pieces, but the entire process probably took 2 years for me to get to more clarity. And I wrote more mostly to get feedback and to see what resonated for people and what it was that people were concerned about versus not, and what it was that I reacted to. So sometimes the thinking and reflecting process takes a really, really long time. Other times it takes less time, but I think building in time in your schedule to sort of reflect on your own and then to reflect with other people makes an enormous difference on making sure that you don't feel like you're reacting to everything, but rather being a lot more proactive, intentional, and thoughtful.
That's a really interesting question. So I think there's something organic, there's something innate about the ability to think. And there's also something learned. Yeah, so I think that thinking is fundamentally a product of curiosity. Yeah, so like I had a friend who used to take apart everything, toys. Like when he was a little kid, his parents would give him a toy and he would take it apart. Right? And the parents would be upset because he's ruining the toy, but what he was doing is he was taking apart the toy to see how it worked. And he ended up becoming an engineer. Right? So I think that there's something innate that drives us to think a certain way that's fueled by curiosity. So I think what helps me is this sense of curiosity. And, I'm not going to miss an opportunity to say data analytics, to say data, because that's where I come from. I'll share with you that we are now having an election in the United States.
Yep.
And there's a lot of tension between the Republicans and the Democrats. And the Republicans want you to think a certain way. They want you to be afraid. They want to fund the police. They want stronger laws against crime, right? We played this game like in the mid-'80s, and this concept on focusing on crimes and criminals did not help this country. It actually hurt this country. But that's the message. The message is crime, inflation, right? And civil liberties. Those are the three themes. And the Republicans are saying, tough on crime, tough, no bail, right? But if you look at the data, the communities where they had bail reform actually had better outcomes because we released people so that they could fix their lives, so that they could pay their debt to society, instead of being locked up in jail until your trial, where you just get more in debt, right? And your family, you can't go back to your job, your family suffer, and when families suffer, communities suffer. And so the Republicans want you to think that you should be tough on crime, but being tough on crime actually is deleterious. It hurts communities. And they're telling you a story without showing you the data. And if you actually look at the data, it's the other way. You should be less tough on bail. You should let people go back to work. I mean, I'm not saying if somebody, shoots somebody, right? Somebody kills somebody. I'm not talking about that kind of a violent crime. I'm talking about, civil crime, not bodily crime, not when you're killing somebody.
Yep.
But if somebody steals something from somebody else, right? They put them in jail until their trial. And the trial can be a year. So you're destroying somebody's life and the people that depend on them. And then it goes downhill. So it's a long way to say, get data. Yeah? Get data. Don't let somebody else influence your opinion by trusting them. Do your own research and get the data. And I'll give you another momism. My mother used to say, if you can't decide, if you can't make up your mind about something, it's because you simply don't have enough information.
Wow.
So if you are uncertain about what you should do, if you can't decide, should I do this or should I do that, it's because you simply don't have enough information. So go out and get more information. And the minute you have enough information, the answer will become very clear to you.
Wow.
That's a great observation that you've done with that heart. I truly believe why we've got more people coming into this development space is because the world is in a different conscious state of awareness in the last 20 years. In evolution and the revolution and the industrial revolution, and the technology is coming. I think the world, even though we've been in the virtual world for the last 2 years because of COVID, I think the world has helped us. It's moved into a consciously high level with emotional intelligence and everything, and we want to connect more. So therefore, if we want to connect more, for us to connect more to other human beings, there has to be, this is my research head on and everything, there has to be a want for more knowledge, for more learning, for more growth, and therefore it takes us, it pulls us, or the calling, into those arenas to learn more about who we are, number one. And number two, once we learn that, we almost feel compelled to go and share it or help others. So even though I had, a caring profession like nursing, when I got into the self-development world and the learning world of understanding how the brain works and emotions and how feelings and humans work, it's always with me, and I know it's with, because I've spoken to so many people, it's a compelling reason that you have to find out more, know more, grow more. So I think that's why it's attracting a lot of people into that space. Now, you and I know there can be good coaches, there can be good leaderships, there can be good people that teach, train, mentor, whatever, but there can also be average people that can teach, train. And that's the personal pull. I think when somebody engages a coach, or somebody wants a leadership trainer, or somebody wants to just reach out to somebody, like we see things on social media, is that a good course to go on? Is that a good learning to learn? The values come through even on a social media post. I think people seek out the right feeling and the right vibrational level of who they should be working with. That's how we got together, and we found out before we recorded this call that we had similar values.
Yeah.
See, it works. Great question. I think that's a very deep question to ask, and I think, like this phone call I was just telling you about earlier, I think it's a very deep question to embrace for someone to take on board if they've had the security of working for a company, like you say, getting all the benefits. And the company I was at, I was getting good money and good benefits. And my friend said at the time, "What are you doing? You're crazy, woman, crazy, you know? It's a tough world out there." And I said, "I know." But it's the one word Vivian, actually, funniest enough, said there. It begins with C. It's called courage.
Courage.
It's courage. That's the emotion I know that I needed and had at the time. But I think it goes back to what we touched on here, and you said earlier in our pre-conversation, it's having that faith. It's whatever your faith is to you. There has to be a trust and a knowing that you have the courage. You have to be courageous if you're going to make these informative choices in your life. So I think to anybody that's listening to this in the future, and they're in that limbo land, and find some courage from somewhere. Find some courage to do what you believe you want to do, number one, and take it deeper. Find out what you believe you are put on this planet to do. But trust in your faith, whatever that, and that could be even an atheist faith. Even if you don't believe in a God, a spirit, a higher power, whatever it is, even if you just believe in yourself, you know? Believe in yourself that you can make that leap of faith, that you can dig deep and get that courage from every cell of your body if you believe you want to make a bigger difference. I think the last thing to say on that is find the courage first yourself, but then don't make it about you. Make it about helping others. That is a far more emotive reason to move forward. Like you guys are doing on this fantastic thing that you're helping people with. You're making it about hearing people's journeys and stories to help others. You're not just doing it for the sake of doing a podcast, are you? So I think when we make it about others, we don't always get that in our 20s and not always necessarily in our 30s, but make it about others, and the journey is so much richer in emotion, not necessarily in money, but it's richer in knowing that you are living your truth.